Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keith Plowman. I'm the president of the Fort McMurray Construction Association. And I want to personally welcome and thank you for joining us today in this virtual town hall with Maxime Bernier, leader of the People's Party of Canada. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a shout out to a couple of our counselors that are supposed to be on the line. I know I saw Verna Murphy, one of our local counselors here, and I think Sheila Lalonde is also going to be joining. So welcome to our counselors. It's my pleasure to introduce Max Bernier, the leader of the People's Party of Canada. Max was called to the Quebec bar in 1990. Mr. Bernier has had a long-standing interest in business, and during his career, he's worked with several financial institutions before becoming the executive vice president of the Montreal Economic Institute. He was first elected as a member of parliament in 2006 and was appointed to cabinet as the Minister of Industry. While in this portfolio, he's known for deregulating major portions of the telecommunications sector. Mr. Bernier also served as Minister of Foreign Affairs from August 14th, 2007 to May 26th, 2008. He was re-elected again on October 14th, 2008, receiving the largest majority of all MPs in Quebec. May 2nd, 2011, he was again re-elected and appointed Minister of State for Small Business and Tourism. Mr. Bernier was re-elected for a fourth time in November 2015, receiving more than 59% of the vote, which is pretty remarkable. Mr. Bernier once said, "I'm in politics to defend ideas, real conservative ideas, because I passionately care about Canada's future." He came to believe that his party's stand on several issues had all but abandoned its core conservative principles. And in a statement at the time, he said, "I still cannot understand how a party that is supposed to defend free markets supports a small cartel that artificially increases the price of milk, chicken, and eggs for millions of Canadian consumers. More importantly, supply management has become one of the main stumbling blocks to an agreement with the United States on NAFTA." Now, saying that the Conservative Party had abandoned conservatives and had nothing of substance to offer Canadians, Mr. Bernier left the party on August 23rd, 2018 to sit as an independent. He then launched his own party, the People's Party of Canada. So after that introduction, I just want to say a couple of things, and I'll add a couple of questions that I have. Number one, what I really want to hear today is, who is Max Bernier? What do you stand for? What do you believe? And the second thing, how would a PPC government affect or change the quality of life for the people in our region, most importantly? So with that, please, Mr. Bernier.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy, very pleased to be with you virtually, but at least I'm there. And I want to thank you for giving me that opportunity to speak to your members. So first of all, who is Maxime Bernier? Like you just said, I worked in the private sector, in the financial sector before being in politics. And I went into politics because I wanted to have a smaller government in Ottawa, a government that will respect the Constitution and that will also have the right conservative policies for our country. As you just said at the end, I resigned from the Conservative Party of Canada in 2018, saying that this party, the Conservative Party of Canada, is intellectually and morally corrupt. And since that time, I think you had, and everybody had a lot of proof and evidence of that. I'll start by the first one. Aaron O'Toole said that he won't balance the budget in a mandate. It will take 10 years. So it's like saying what Justin Trudeau is saying right now. They won't balance the budget. 10 years is more than 3 mandates. And at the same time, Aaron O'Toole said that he will fight climate change and sign the Paris Accord and impose a carbon tax and and more regulations on businesses. So we won't do that. So we created the People's Party of Canada based on 4 principles: individual freedom, personal responsibility, fairness, and respect. And we are doing politics differently because we don't try to appeal to every special interest group in this country, contrary to the liberals, the conservatives. We are doing politics based on principle and ideas. Maybe these ideas are not popular today, but that does not mean that they're not just and true. I think an idea become just and true when you are able to explain that to a population. It's not because it's popular or not. I'll give you an example. We want a smaller government in Ottawa. We want to be sure to cut taxes, but at the same time, we need to be responsible. And I don't think that the Trudeau government, their policy, their budget is good for the economy and good for the future of our country. They're spending money that we don't have. The Bank of Canada is printing money like never. And we have a huge deficit because of that of more than $340 billion. So more stimulus is not the solution. More stimulus is a sedative for the economy, not a stimulus. And so they don't understand that. They're spending money that we don't have, and we will have to pay for it by maybe increase of our taxes, but for sure with inflation. And I like to say, inflation is a hidden tax. The government will let you have your own money in your own pockets, but you won't be able to buy the same amount of goods and services with that money because you will lose your purchasing power and your standard of living with inflation. And that's coming right now. So our policies for the economy is to have a smaller government, cutting spending, and being sure that we'll be able to balance the budget in a mandate. We're not afraid to say that we'll cut all corporate welfare, all subsidies to businesses, and our goal at the end is to have, is to have a flat tax for business at 15%. We can save a lot of money if we are cutting subsidies to businesses, about $10 billion, cutting foreign aid, about $5 billion. So we will have a detailed plan for the next general election on our economic platform. But that being said, I want to give you the floor to be able to answer to your questions first. I think that's the most important for me and for you.
Thank you for that. Sounds like you've taken a lot of time and thought into that. So we did get some questions from our members. So I've got them written down here. You said, you talked about stimulus quickly there. So I'm going to go to our first question, and it talks about existing infrastructure commitments that the federal government has. So basically, they did an audit and found out that they were $2 billion behind in the stimulus spending. In the construction industry, we look at stimulus spending as doing some of those infrastructure projects. And then while the government is putting out that money, at least in the end, they're getting something back for the money that they're putting out. They're not just putting out money for nothing. So what's your plan with the stimulus spending and the infrastructure program going forward?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think it's a very important question. And we have a policy that is very different than all the other traditional and establishment political parties. So listen to me, we will cut all infrastructure spending at the federal level because it's not in line with our constitution. And that's a program that actually Jean Chrétien put established that program, infrastructure program, at the time when the federal government had huge surplus. And that goal of that program was to be able to buy votes by spending money and giving money to municipalities and different regions of our country. So this program, the infrastructure program, is unconstitutional. We want to respect the constitution, and every province must be able to spend for their own infrastructures. But speaking about national infrastructure, That's under the jurisdiction of the federal government. So yes, we need to balance the budget, and we'll cut that program. So we won't increase that $2 billion. Actually, it will go down, and that's the only way to be sure to be back to a balanced budget. But that being said, the budget that the Trudeau government put forward, it's mostly a budget about redistribution of wealth. And the budget that we're looking forward, it's a budget that will encourage private investment and also more productivity by changing our tax system, by not spending money that we don't have. But we will spend on national infrastructure programs like pipelines. We are the only political party in this country that will use the Constitution, the Section 9210 in our Constitution, to build a real national infrastructure pipelines all across the country, because it's under our jurisdiction. And actually, the federal government, since the Confederation, used that clause in our Constitution more than 100 times to be sure to build national infrastructure, right away and all that, since the beginning of the Confederation. So I know that some provinces, like Quebec, they don't want any pipeline on their territory. But that's why you will need to use that section in the Constitution to impose a pipeline on these provinces. And it's simple. You just have to pass a law, and you just have to say in that law, this or that pipeline is for the national interest. And like that, the federal government will have full jurisdiction. So that will be an important infrastructure, not only for Western Canada, Canadians, but also for the country. It is too important. The oil and gas industry, it's an important industry in our country. We need to promote that. And the participation of the oil and gas industry in our GDP is very important for Alberta, for Ontario, for Quebec, and other provinces. So yes, we will promote the oil and gas industry. We will be sure to be able to build the pipelines by using the Constitution. We will repeal the bills that Justin Trudeau put forward to block any construction of pipelines. We will streamline the process with the Department of Environment in Canada to have a clear process and a fast process to approve pipelines. So that's a kind of a revolution. And we won't sign the Paris Accord because the environment is a shared jurisdiction with provinces. So if it's so important for Quebec or Alberta or Ontario to fight climate change, they will be able to do that. But we won't impose a carbon tax or more regulations on businesses to fight climate change. So that's a huge difference between us and all the other establishment parties like the Conservatives. So no carbon tax, no regulations, no Paris Accord, yes for pipelines. And I think that will be the real national infrastructure where the federal government can spend money for the national interest. So we'll do that instead of having a program, try to buy votes and building local infrastructure. If Quebec wants to build a bridge in Quebec City, they will have to raise the money in Quebec. And I think it's unfair to tax Albertan for using their money to build a local infrastructure like a bridge in Quebec City or in Montreal. So let's respect the Constitution. Provinces that want to spend money on infrastructure, they will be able to do that, but we'll spend money on infrastructure, on real national infrastructure like pipelines.
Okay, you are really getting to the heart of the issue when you're talking about pipelines. That's something that's really big to us there. And I've got another question on pipelines coming up, so we'll come back to that one a little bit. Before we leave the stimulus thing, I just want to circle back and just make sure that I'm understanding this correctly. So no stimulus packages from Ottawa except for federal infrastructure pipelines, that sort of thing. Is there a plan for to stimulate the economy through this downtime and through the COVID stuff that's going to kickstart the economy back again? Or are you doing that through deregulation and getting rid of red tape?
Yeah, more than that, I think you have a point there to deregulation, fewer red tape, more competition. We believe in competition. So there's some legislations against competition that we must try to look at all these legislation to be sure that we have open competition. I can add also real free trade in our country. You know, after more than 150 years, we don't have a free trade agreement across the country. So we need to tackle that. It's under the federal jurisdiction, and we need to have that discussion with provinces to impose also free trade in this country. It's easier for people in Nova Scotia to deal with the state of Maine than with Alberta or Quebec or Ontario. So we built this country starting in 1867 for having a real economic union, and we don't have that in our country. So that will be a part of our economic program to be sure to have real free trade all across the country and use the Constitution if because internal trade, interprovincial trade, it's under the jurisdiction of the federal government. I know that the federal government, and I was an industry minister under the Harper government, we try to speak with provinces for more free trades, and the Trudeau government did the same thing. But at the end, you know, every jurisdiction um, wants to keep their privileges, and so it's very difficult. I think you'll need to impose that and use the Constitution for that. So that's a part of our program. But yes, we don't believe in stimulus. You don't create any wealth when you are printing money that you don't have, when you are having huge deficit like that. The best way is to keep your own money in your own pockets. But I must admit that it would be very difficult to lower taxes to businesses. We had in our plan a 15 flat tax rate for businesses at the last general campaign. We'll have to review that because our main goal will be to balance the budget in a mandate. And after that, lower taxes to everybody. But before that, I think you have a point there. We can look at legislation, less red tapes and more competitions and less regulations. That will be important also. And to promote, if you want to invest in a huge infrastructure project in this country right now, it can take years. I think we can be sure that review these process and to be able to invest as soon as possible, while at the same time respecting the federal jurisdiction and regulations. So we want to improve the time and being sure that the federal government will be more efficient in approving national infrastructure projects, but also investment from a corporation.
Thank you. So I'm going to switch, I guess, to the pipeline question. So we've had a lot of visits from federal ministers in the Fort McMurray area, and every time they come here, they make the same statement that this region and Western Canada is the economic engine of Canada. And then they go back to Ottawa and they're canceling pipelines. They're making it as difficult as they possibly can to make sure that product out of Western Canada is flowing not only in Canada, but out to the rest of the world. So again, if you can just sort of reiterate your plan on how you're going to deal with sort of that Western alienation, first of all, and second of all, how you're going to get the oil from the economic engine of Canada, not only to Canada, but to outside Canada as well.
Yes, thanks for the question. I must say that I've been in Fort McMurray, I think more than 2 times, 3 times, when I was an MP, when I was a minister, and after that, when I was running for the last general election. So I know Fort McMurray. I had a chance also to visit, do an helicopter tour, and I was very impressed. So you spoke about Western alienation, and actually you have a point there. You have a big point. I'm the only and leader in Canada that recognize Western alienation. I was in Alberta maybe 2 months ago, and I delivered a speech called radical decentralization. That's the way to deal with Western alienation. You need to be able at the provincial level to have the same power than Quebec has on healthcare and other subjects. So on other policies also. The only way is to respect the Constitution. And if you do that, you'll have a radical decentralization. And that's the only way to deal with Western alienation. And it's important because it's important for the unity of this country, but it's important also for the economy and the prosperity of our country to have a position on Western alienation. So I encourage your members to go on our website, People's Party of Canada.ca, and to read my speech on the radical decentralization that I did in front of a separatist crowd in Alberta, and I had a standing ovation. So that must be a good speech. That was good also for Western Canada, but also for Eastern Canada. Speaking about pipelines, I'm coming from Quebec, and for the Quebec government is listening the radical environmentalists and also some provincial governments. But in the end, if you speak to the Quebec population and explain that pipelines are safer for the environment and for the population, they will understand that. Actually, I'm saying that in Quebec, and I think you can have an approval, a huge approval rate for pipelines in Quebec. The Quebec government does not represent the population of Quebec on pipelines. I'll give you an example. We had the huge tragedy in Lac Mégantic more than 8 years ago. That was just near my former riding of Beauce. And people understand after that tragedy that it's safer to transport oil and gas by pipelines than by train or by trucks. So, and it's more efficient. And we are in 2021. We can build good pipelines. And when you're saying to people in Montreal that all the oil and gas that is coming from the port of Montreal to the Trudeau Airport, it's by pipelines under the ground, by pipelines crossing the downtown Montreal. So it's safe, but Quebecers don't know that. So I will always speak for pipelines because the logic it's there. And I said in the beginning that I'm doing politics differently. It's not because a subject is not popular that you cannot speak about it. Usually, traditional politicians won't speak about it. If they have maybe 40% of support, they will take that subject and speak to have more support. But for us, if only 10% of the population are for pipelines, that's a big encouragement for me to speak more about it because we know that's the solution. And the more we speak, the better it will be. And the more people will be on our side. I'll give you the example of the cartel in supply management. When I started to speak against that cartel, only 5% of the population were in favor to abolish that cartel. Now, if you do a poll or a survey, you'll have maybe 30% of them in favor of that because they know that they're paying twice the price for the milk, dairy, and poultry in this country. So for pipelines, that's the logic of the People's Party of Canada. We think we have the best ideas. We just need to be out there and to explain these ideas, speak openly with passion and conviction, and you'll have more support. So actually, we will do a campaign all across the country to promote pipelines and to be sure that you'll find a new markets for the oil and gas in this country.
Thank you for that. That's very important for us to hear. I know sometimes we struggle with how we're going to get this to market, and we appreciate it.
I'm not saying that to please you because I'm speaking to you. Go and see my speeches the last 10 years on pipelines, maybe the last 4 years, and you'll see what I'm telling you right now. I said that before. I said that before in New Brunswick. I said that before in Quebec in French. I said that before in BC. So it's not, I'm not doing politics to please you. That's the best policy for Alberta, but that's the best policy also for Canada.
I think most of us agree with you on that one. Thank you. I'm gonna go to the third question that we had here, and I'm actually not sure how you're gonna answer this. We talk about domestic manufacturing. So in the construction industry, We've noticed an incredible increase in prices of lumber, steel, building supplies, everything. The prices are, I don't know if you've seen lumber prices, they've almost
Yeah.
tripled in the last month. It's
Yeah.
it's crazy. I'm wondering what your plan is to try and get some of that manufacturing and some of that production back in Canada instead of farming that out to foreign countries.
Yes, I think the most important for us is the relationship with China. We will work with our allies. We will work with the United States, Australia, UK, to be sure that the Chinese, that our country will be less dependent, like the US and other Western countries, will be less dependent of the Chinese supply chains. I think that's very important, not only in healthcare, but also for natural resources. We said that in our platform at the last general election. You can see that on our website. That will be the same policy for the next general election. We want to be sure that our natural resources won't be controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, and so that's important. We will forbid the Chinese Communist corporation to buy our natural resources. That's too important. So I think we'll do that. Plus, also being sure that we'll be less dependent of the Chinese supply chains. So that being said, about the price and the inflation, you're absolutely right. Actually, the inflation is there. So what can we do? I'll go back to the Bank of Canada. When you are printing money, it's like having doing T-shirts. If there's a lot of T-shirts on the market, the price will go down. If the T-shirts are rare, the price will go up. So when you print too much money, the price is going down. So what that means, it's you have inflation because you're printing a lot of money. The value of your money is going down, and so you have inflation. We have inflation not only in Canada, in US and in Europe also, because all central banks are printing money to buy their bonds. Actually, the Bank of Canada said that they're ready to print money and buy up to 50% of the Canadian bonds. So why? Because the private sector doesn't want to go and jump into that market because the risk is so high with our deficit and our debts, but the reward, the inflation, the interest rate is very low. So they are asking for more interest rate, but the Bank of Canada and also the Fed in US don't want to increase interest rate. They're artificially low. So because of that, they have to buy a treasury bond in US and Canadian bonds in Canada. And by doing that, the Bank of Canada, you can go on their website, you see how much money they print since the COVID-19. And now when you have all that money in circulation, you have inflation. If you have always the same amount of money in circulation, you cannot have general inflation because maybe the price of a good would go up, but the price of another good would go down when you have the same amount of money in circulation. And actually, that's part of our policy. We want the Bank of Canada to have a zero inflation target. Now the Bank of Canada has a 2% inflation target, but on 5 years. And they're saying if the inflation is going more than 2%, maybe 3 or 4, that would be okay because we had less than 2% for the last 5 years. So, but when the inflation will jump to 2 or 3%, it would be very difficult for the bank to control it. And we may have the same thing that we had in the 1970s, 1980s. So what I'm telling you, the price of these goods are going up because of the money that they're printing, not only in Canada, but everywhere. And the real solution is to say no to the new monetary policy that printing money is good. Just go back to the old ways that living belong your means and not try to finance the federal government like the Bank of Canada is doing and the Fed in the US. So I cannot do answering your question shortly. I cannot do anything with that inflation. And I want to tell you, we may have 5% inflation before the end of this year, and it can go to 10% inflation. And when it will be 10%, the Bank of Canada will raise and the Fed will raise interest rate. And that will be very tough for businesses because, as you know, a lot of businesses and also individual Canadians and the provincial and federal governments have huge debts. So it would be very, very tough for the economy. That's why they don't want to increase interest rate right now, because they know that they will kill the 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 economy right now. So they try to put more stimulus, but when they're doing that, we have a bubble. The bubble is going bigger and bigger and bigger, and now we'll have a bubble in the real estate market in Montreal, in Toronto, in Vancouver, and we'll have more bubbles because we are printing more money. So sorry to tell you that I don't see a right future for the economy, the Canadian economy and the US economy, but we need to tell the truth.
Well, thanks for that great news, Max. I'm just kidding. No, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying. Appreciate your thoughts on that. I know we're getting close to our time. Have you? Can you take one more question?
Yes, for sure. Yes.
I just wanted to get your sort of your take on the COVID response of the federal government. I know, we've heard trouble with vaccines, trouble with the rollout.
Yes.
How would you have done it differently? Is there anything that could have been done differently to change the outcomes?
Yes, actually, it's a good question because it's going very well with the last question. It's a big disaster. We shut down the economy. We have curfew here in Quebec. In Ontario, it's a stay-at-home policy. So some essential businesses were open. For me, all business is essential, and because of that, the federal government uh, the federal government spend a lot of money. That's why we have a huge deficit. So what they did, it's a worse answer. It's the first time in the history of humanity that we are fighting a virus with lockdowns. We need to end these lockdowns as soon as possible. And I'm on the side of the Burlington Declaration from three renowned medical expert, and they're saying, the solution we know this virus is affected mostly older people with comorbidity. So we need to protect them. And we didn't do that. Actually, here in Quebec, 80% of the deaths are coming from the long term care seniors' home. So the provincial government is responsible of that. If you are under 70 years old in this country, if you have COVID, the chance of surviving COVID, it's 95.95%. So your chance to die of COVID, if you're under 70 years old, it's 0.05%. So that's why we don't need these lockdowns. We need that to stop as soon as possible, reopen the economy. Our kids must be able to go back to school. Our businesses must be able to reopen all across the country. And the way to fight COVID with the data and the statistic that we have right now, protect the older people, yeah, vaccine people who wants to be vaccinated, and respect also their freedom. I don't believe in a COVID vaccine passport. That will create two kinds of citizens: the one vaccinated and the one unvaccinated. Some would have some privileges and other not. And I don't want a society that is asking for my papers every time that I'm going to a restaurant or seeing a hockey game or things like that. So for me, the way that they manage, not only the federal government, but the provincial government, they manage COVID-19 is a disaster. And in 2 years, you'll see, we'll have report about that. And we just had a report in Ontario about the way that they manage their long-term care facilities over there. So it was a disaster, a 300 pages report. We had the same report in Quebec here, but the media don't want to speak about that. So for me, COVID, protect the vulnerable. Let's reopen the economy as soon as possible. And I'm doing politics at the federal level, so cut all these programs that Trudeau put forward to compensate for the lockdowns. So if you don't give any incentive to provinces by giving them money to compensate for the economic loss of lockdowns, they won't do any lockdowns like that. So the federal government has a role because it's giving incentive to provinces to continue their lockdowns. So that will have been my position as Prime Minister of Canada. Protect the older people, no program, no lockdown, so you don't have to spend money that you don't have. So that's and if you look right now at the some jurisdiction in US, you can see it's about the same. States that had a very draconian lockdowns and states who didn't have any lockdowns, it's about the same. The number of cases, the number of deaths, and now you have big states like California, not California, they're doing the opposite, like Texas, Florida, Georgia, 16 states that are fully open, and the cases are going down, and they have fewer deaths. So I don't understand what is happening right now, and specifically in your own province right now in Alberta, Jason Kenney is doubling down on lockdowns. If lockdowns work, how come we still have another lockdowns? And if lockdowns don't work, how come we are having a lockdown? So it's not based on science, and it's an experiment that failed.
Well, thank you very much for staying over your time. I really appreciate your candidness, the way you speak your mind. I really do appreciate that. And I think at the beginning I said I wanted to see who Max Bernier was. I think we got to see him today. So I want to say thank you for your passion. Thanks for joining us today, and your words. It was very eye-opening, and we appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you very much for giving me that opportunity, and I hope I'll be able to see you in person. I'll do a tour in Alberta, maybe in June or July, and I have a plan to go to see the whole sun over there and seeing you guys. So maybe I'll be able to see some of your members when I'll do that trip over there.
Anytime. Thanks again.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. Bye, everyone.